Hello, and welcome to the Book Speaks podcast, where the book speaks for itself. I'm your host, Benjamin Douglas, and this is the show where each week I read a chapter from a different indie author. Thanks for joining me for today's reading. Hi everybody, happy Friday, and thanks for joining me for a very special episode of the Book Speaks podcast, episode number 10! That's right, today we break into the double digits. Very exciting. And as promised, there's a special mystery author today. Well, if you've been following along at all, it's not a great mystery. Today I'll be reading from my own forthcoming work. So some science fiction today from myself, Benjamin Douglas. Yes, that is shamelessly self-serving. No, I don't mind a bit. It's my show. But thanks for being here. I hope you enjoy it, even though it's me. And if you find it just too obnoxious to handle, please come back next week. Next week, we're going to have Mr. Chris Fox himself, the indie author phenomenon, rising star, author mentor, and just all-around good guy. So do come back next week for that. And I have the next few episodes planned after Mr. Fox as well. So things are rolling right along. Keep hanging out every Friday here at the bookspeakspodcast.wordpress.com. Keep listening on iTunes if that's your thing. Any ratings and reviews I really appreciate. And just glad to have you along for the ride. So thank you for being here. I woke up this morning feeling pretty under the weather. You can probably hear that in my voice, so I want to apologize for the clarity or lack thereof in my speaking voice today. I don't think you're going to find that's the case in the reading, which I recorded yesterday, but today it's just a glum, rainy day here in Iowa, and I had a rough night with some allergies, so take care of yourselves, kids. Protect your health. It's important. It doesn't always seem important until suddenly it is, and then it's too late to do something about, having taken an allergy pill or, hydrated yourself enough and gotten enough rest. Take care of yourselves. That's my PSA for the week. As always, I'm going to begin my discussion of today's author, yours truly, by reading my Amazon author bio. So here we go. Hi! I'm Ben, and I love reading and writing books. Thank you for visiting my Amazon author page. I was born at a young age at a nearby distant location. After spending 5 lifetimes consuming all things speculative fiction, I spent another consuming all things indie author related, and decided to spend this one writing books. I currently reside in Iowa with my wife, my tiny mini-me, and our fuzzy feline god, Max. It's a good life. If you'd like to read my poems, follow me on my sci-fi and fantasy indie author journey, or find pictures of Max that you can print and put up in your own home as prayer shrines, visit me at http://benjamindouglasbooks.wordpress.com. If you'd like to contact me directly for any reason, a reasonable reason, one hopes, you can do so at benjamindouglasbooks@gmail.com. And if you'd like to follow and rate and review my podcast, the Book Speaks Podcast, please do so at http://thebookspeakspodcast.wordpress.com. Thanks, beautiful reader. Now go out there and make something of myself. Right, there's me. Oh boy, I hate reading that out loud. But that's my Amazon author bio. And believe it or not, I just set this up yesterday. So, hey Ben, the question is on your lips, what have you been doing with yourself? You just made your Amazon page yesterday. You don't even have a book out yet. Well, for the past couple of years, I've been gradually failing my way toward a successful writing habit. A lot of authors talk about how slow things are at the beginning, at the start of their writing habit and their writing career. Some authors, it's not like that. They come out right out the womb writing, I guess. I don't know. But I think that's kind of a freak talent. I think most of us take a while to sort of build that into our lives, make it something that we're not only comfortable with, but that produces consistent results. And so that's what I've been up to. I've been active on Kboards for the last 2 years, and in that time, I've undertaken a writing challenge. I tried to do a steampunk novel. I got all my words down, but the thing fell apart. I've been sussing out whether I'm a plotter or a pantser. Turns out that for the time being, at least, I really work better as a pantser, which is tricky to plan around. That's another reason why it's taking me so long. I just find that when I do an outline, I really enjoy doing the outline of a novel, but once the outline is done, I have no desire to write the novel because it's like I just did that. It's like I just did all the fun part. All the creation is over. And what I really delight in as a creative person is that that joy and exaltation of discovery and surprise as I'm writing. I think a lot of authors are like that. Somehow, many of you are able to maintain that joy even with a good outline. I envy you. And I suspect that as I mature as a writer, I'll probably move into that arena. I'll certainly try to, because having a good outlining practice just seems like an intelligent thing to do. But for the time being, I'm a pantser. And I've got so many like outlines and started projects and half-finished projects taking up space on my hard drive. It's kind of sad. It's really not actually funny. If I were to detail to you all the pre-Columbian fantasy and the Arthurian fantasy and the vampire stories and the other science fiction that's more like a space opera and the Egyptian pre-dynastic fantasy and the sort of American folktale Civil War thing. Like, I'm just spilling all my ideas to you now, but, I'll probably never get to half of them because apparently I take 2 years to write a book. So that's what I've been doing. But along the way, as I work on my writing habit, I've been imbibing all I can from this indie author community, and specifically from this community of creators who are producing content marketed towards people like myself, who also wish to be authors and creators. So I've mentioned before, I'm an active member on Kboards. If you're not on Kboards and you're a writer, I highly recommend you check it out. There's a lot of really interesting and helpful information in the Writers Cafe forum on Kboards. I'm an active member in the 20 Books to 50K Facebook group, which I've mentioned before on the show. If you haven't checked that out yet, I highly recommend it. 20 Books to 50K. I've also been listening to a lot of these podcasts fairly regularly. The three I always bring up because I listen to them every week without fail are the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the Sell More Books Show, and the Creative Pen Podcast. I can't highly enough recommend these podcasts for an indie author. I find them indispensable. But you know what? Life also happens, and the truth of the matter is there's a lot in my life going on. I just finished coursework on my doctorate degree, my terminal degree, in one of my other 9 lives, which is classical singing and voice teaching. And I'm using that. So I'm teaching part-time at a couple of local colleges at the moment. My wife and I also have a 7-month-old baby boy, our first child. So that's what's been taking a lot of my time for the past year. I stay home with him during the day. So I'm a stay-at-home dad, 9 to 5, and then I go teach in the evenings. So, my writing time is like his nap time if all the bottles are clean and if all the dishes are clean and the laundry is clean and folded and put away and And I've been doing this podcast too, because I'm crazy apparently. So, not to make excuses, and I know these are all laden with so much privilege, it's ridiculous. Hey, by the way, not to totally rip off Joanna Penn on mindset, but just as a mindset exercise, I know some of us really do have difficult times we go through. Well, everyone has difficult times. Some of us, really do have difficult lives, hard situations. But I bet that most of us who are in a position to spend some time listening to a podcast, probably most of our stressors in life are really big privileges as well. It's such a joy and a privilege to be a father, and it is such a joy and a privilege to have pursued higher education and to have secondary degrees and to have a profession. So, I'm complaining, but I feel bad about it because I'm really happy. I just want to defend why I haven't put a book out yet. Speaking of putting a book out, I do, as of yesterday, have my first title out on pre-order. That is The Lunar Gambit, Book 1 of the Starship Fairfax, a military science fiction adventure by Benjamin Douglas. Hey, if you want to do me a favor, if you're enjoying the show or you just want to support another indie author, I strongly invite you to hop over to Amazon, look up The Lunar Gambit in the Kindle store, or go to the show notes, http://thebookspeakspodcast.wordpress.com. I'll definitely drop a link there. This is 99 cents for the duration of the pre-order. The book comes out on June 29th, and either on that date or maybe a week later, I haven't really decided yet, it's going to go up to $2.99. So if you want to support me for super cheap, just $1, go grab that book on pre-order. You'll be doing me a huge solid. Sometime in the coming week, I strongly hope to finish the short story novelette that I've been working on, The Trials of Io, that will serve as a mailing list magnet. And that is going to be a free story novelette that is only available, it's exclusively available to my mailing list subscribers. So look for notes on that as well. I'm sure I'll mention it in next week's show, and next week is probably when I'll have a link up to that in the show notes. This week's big thought, let's talk about our privileges, the things that keep us from writing, but that are joys in our lives. Chris Fox, who we'll be talking about next week, in one of his wonderful YouTube videos, he issues this great challenge, which is, hey, if you really want to write a book, you can make the time. There are 24 hours in a day. You just have to decide what you're doing with that time. If you'd rather be at another job, that's your decision. If you'd rather be with your family, that's your decision. He's not making a moral or a judgment call on these decisions. It's just the cold, hard facts. And, I've made my bed in many of these respects, and I'm happy to sleep in it. But I am slowly cranking the writing wheel as well. So, in the spirit of celebration of life and all the good things happening in our lives, I invite you to drop a comment in the comments section on the podcast webpage, or shoot me an email if you like. Brag to me while you complain about the things in your life that are going on other than writing. The readings today are 2, because both are reasonably short. The first comes from that mailing list magnet I'm working on, The Trials of Io. I'm going to read just under 2,000 words from that. And then the second is the first chapter of the book itself, The Lunar Gambit, which will be the first in series for the Starship Fairfax. So stick around for both readings if you're enjoying it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I want to remind everyone, of course, that these readings do not come from the official audiobook. I probably will, at some point, record an audiobook for The Lunar Gambit, and when that happens, I'll create new audio. So this is done with my own permission for the purpose of this podcast. Yeah. thanks again for being here, for listening to my spiel, and for listening to my work. I hope you really enjoy it. Without any further ado, here are today's readings. The Trials of Io, a Starship Fairfax prequel story by Benjamin Douglas. Darren Jett secured his helmet and checked his vital readings one more time to make sure the suit was working. He was sure something would come loose, or his power pack would fail, or his spatial comp would shut down, and he would wander blindly into the path of a rogue meteor. Years of experience with his own luck had taught him to anticipate as much. The last thing he actually expected was to survive the trials whole, unscathed, and victorious. But he had to try. It was the only way to pass into the arms of the Suns, the most elite training program in the solar system, and the only route to his ultimate destination, to join the Sons of Jupiter. "Ready, kid?" The pilot's voice over the comm was high and choked with fat. He seemed entirely too jolly to be ferrying people around in the radiation zone. Darren glanced at his readings one last time to make sure his own levels were safe. He glanced up at the pilot through the window to the cockpit, aware he hadn't answered. Numbly, he nodded. "Coulda fooled me," the fat man mumbled. "Drop is in 30. That's 30 seconds. Kite secured?" A moment of panic. Was it? He turned in a half circle like a dog after its own tail. Ah, yes. It was secured. He nodded again. "Best of luck!" The man's face soured. "Oh," he turned. "Almost forgot. Last set of instructions." He pointed through the window, and Darren heard a beep, followed by a snap, as a tiny compartment in the wall popped open. Darren ducked down to peer inside and spotted a drive, then snatched it out and plugged it into the data slot on the forearm of his suit. Instructions now? He was about to go into free fall over one of the most hostile surfaces in the system, and they were amending the mission? "My luck," he grumbled. The fat man smiled without it reaching his eyes. 10, 9, 8, 7... His hand hovered over the controls. Darren turned his back on him and closed his eyes, focusing on slowing his breath. 2, 1... Happy trails, sucker! The pilot laughed, a vile, throaty sound, and the hatch hissed open. A breeze swept into the cargo hold, just enough to ruffle the pants of Darren's suit. He opened his eyes and watched the craggy surface flying past, tens of meters below. No point dragging it out, he thought. He stepped off the edge and dropped into the thin atmosphere of Io. There wasn't much resistance for the kite to sail on, but that was all right. There wasn't enough gravity to kill him from the fall, either. Just enough to break a leg or two if he landed funny, he reminded himself. He pulled the string. It was soundless, but he felt the gentle tug at his back as the kite expanded and locked into place, an enormous pair of silica fabric wings hovering over him. His fall slowed, and he swooped forward, sucking his teeth as he watched the surface grow closer. He was happy to not see any of the brilliant red molten rock anywhere near him. Io suffered from that fascinating planetary malady, volcanism. One of the reasons the Arms of the Suns had chosen it as their proving grounds for recruits. The constant tug of Jupiter kept the moon's core hot, and eruptions were volatile and unpredictable. This led to the second reason for Io to serve as home of the trials. The surface was covered with razor-sharp crags and edifices, a veritable obstacle course of death. Darren grimaced at the thought. Unfortunately, he could see plenty of that below him now. His eyes scanned the horizon, but he caught no glimpse of the shuttle he was supposed to find. His mission, along with that of the other recruits, was to survive a journey across the lunar surface to an escape shuttle and leave Io. If he managed to get off alive, he was in. That reminded him. He punched in a few commands on his arm device, and a vid popped up inside his helmet. It showed a man sitting behind a dark wooden desk, the banner of the Arms over one shoulder, and that of the Suns over the other. "Greetings, recruit." His voice was dry and old, like himself. "And welcome to the trials. Should you survive, we will soon meet. Should you not, know that your sacrifice for the Suns is not taken lightly." He paused for effect. Darren kept an eye on the surface. His spatial comp readout said he was gliding a mere 15 meters above ground. "You already know that you and 9 other potentials have been dropped on the surface with the goal of finding the shuttle and leaving. I now give you a new, crucial piece of information." The man leaned forward. "The shuttle will only hold 2. Darren waited for him to complete the sentence. 2 what? Kyperian masseurs? If only. His stomach tightened, and he cursed under his breath. "I'm afraid it's first come, first serve. I can only hope you've had the foresight to arm yourselves. There are no combat rules. Your mission objective remains unchanged. Get out alive. Whichever 2 of you manage to claim the shuttle and leave the surface will be embraced by the Arms of the Suns. The rest of you..." He smiled tightly. "Your sacrifice is not taken lightly." The vid flashed off, replaced with an uninterrupted view of the rough terrain. He was 7 meters up now. Time to start looking for a place to land. Crags ran on in endless ridges against the barren horizon. He decided to hug the nearest ridge and shoot for the relative plain beside it. Another 2 meters down, and his line of sight grew even with the crest of the ridge, the rest of the landscape disappearing. No great loss there. It had looked the same in every direction. Hellish. He began to brace for impact. It was difficult to judge by eyeballing it, but his readouts indicated he'd be touching down any second. The hit, and he would try to hop and run, maybe fall over and roll a bit. He decided to try to detach his kite as soon as his feet skimmed rock. Maybe it wouldn't get too roughed up that way. Could be a useful tool before the end. He was thinking about this and watching steam rise gently from the surface below when his spatial comp started to go on the fritz. Interference. Magnetic? Or was there a problem with his radiation seal? He started calling up a subroutine to run diagnostics on the whole suit. Should have been running it already. Childish. This was exactly the kind of lack of foresight that got recruits killed during the trials. The sort of... His heat shield alarm blared into the silence in his suit. He fumbled for the kill switch on his arm, found it, then lost it again as a sudden gust of hot air shot up from beneath him and knocked him back to a standing position. "Thrusters!" he growled to himself, remembering his suit training. Thumb triggers jettisoned from his forearms into the palms of his hands, and he pressed the dual ignitions, killing his momentum and pulling him out of the spin. Good. One problem solved. His readouts flashed red. Heat levels were critical. How was that possible if he wasn't literally on fire? The suit was designed to block all sorts of radiation and maintain stasis inside. All around him, the thin atmosphere had grown hazy and thick. Darren cursed. He had to move. He cut his left thruster and sent more juice to the right, and his suit responded by throwing him violently to the left. The system wasn't designed for use in atmosphere or gravity, no matter how gentle, and he'd only trained to use it in zero-grav simulators. To his right, where he'd just been hovering, the ground quaked and fell into itself like a yawning, toothless mouth. A geyser of steam shot up like a beacon, towering above him and surely breaking through the atmosphere to gush out into space. He didn't want to get caught in whatever came back down. There was no way his suit would survive it. So he pushed his thruster to the max, adding to his already tumultuous flight. He only had a moment to act once the wall of sheer lunar rock to his left filled his vision. He'd forgotten about that. Now he was hurtling toward the crag he had just begun to glide beside, and he was nearly out of thrust fuel. So he went with his gut, did what his instinct commanded. He kicked his feet up over his head and tried his best to pull his weight up into a rotation as the left wing of his kite kissed the rock. Instead of smashing into the spiny ridge and tearing his suit in two, he was flung like a throwing knife over the other side. Space and rock spun in his vision. He was sick. He fought to catch his breath, tried to pull in his limbs so he wouldn't get caught on anything, and finally, blessedly, blacked out. It turned out that Io was a terrifying place to wake up. Darren shook himself and sat up far too quickly. His head swam. A couple of deep breaths, and he started running diagnostics on his suit. It appeared intact. Good. So at least he hadn't died yet. Just been marooned on a hostile volcanic radiation-drenched moon with 9 other people, all likely to kill him to secure their ride out. So, not so bad. Speaking of other people, he murmured, then typed in a new command on his forearm. His readout flashed, announcing the results of his scan. 2 life forms within 100 meters of his current location. He immediately hunched down and found the ground with his belly, looking around. They were far too close. His readout flashed again. 3 life forms, and all getting closer. Great. He pulled up a visual. 3 tiny red dots flickered on. 2 were close together, and both coming toward him from behind, and the other alone and coming from before. All converging on him, it seemed. His stomach flipped as he realized they must all be tracking his life force, too. He was being hunted. The Lunar Gambit. Book 1 of The Starship Fairfax, a military science fiction adventure by Benjamin Douglas. Chapter 1. Lucas Odin woke up with a start and held himself perfectly still, taking a moment to catch his breath and remind himself of where he was. He wasn't sitting in the captain's chair on the bridge. Not yet, anyway. He was still in his bunk, in his tiny first officer's quarters, barely able to stretch out to his full length. His heart slowed to a normal pace as the nightmare left him. No. The Fairfax wasn't falling apart in the depths of space. No alarms were sounding. No emergency lights flared. Everything was perfectly fine. He sat up and slapped his forehead against the bulkhead over his bunk. Well, almost everything. He hadn't anticipated how deep his anxiety would run when he had accepted the first officer promotion the month before. In hindsight, that surprised him. On paper, Lucas was the obvious choice for a command position. His grades had been flawless at the academy. Nearly all of his test scores were off the charts. He came from a good lineage. He had been on starships most of his life, and he was loyal to the council. But there was a world of difference between paper and reality. The sort of, I can't survive a barrel roll in a fighter without losing my breakfast and lunch all over the console difference. His combat command test had shown that clearly enough. He shrugged his deep blue uniform shirt over his gaunt shoulders and began fumbling with the buttons, admitting to himself that his was the realm of the mind, not the body. Lucas Odin now held one of the most coveted positions in the Kuiper fleet. First officer beneath the venerable Captain Ronald Harris of the Starship Fairfax, one of their flagships. And he was a total, irredeemably nerdy, and hopelessly unathletic geek. A beep sounded from the comm unit in his wall. "First Officer Odin to the bridge," the computer announced. "Be right there," Lucas mumbled beneath his breath. Order confirmed, the computer chirped. Tea eclair. Oh, good grief, Sock. Lucas slid into his shoes as the cabinet beside his door hummed to life. A few seconds later there was a beep, announcing the arrival of his tea-flavored pastry. He frowned as he shoved it into his mouth on his way out the door. Green tea and French pastries didn't mix, he decided. The bridge doors hissed open as Lucas swallowed the last bit of eclair. He cleared his throat and strode through, thinking, as he always did when he saw the captain's chair, of his father. Captain, he saluted. Harris shot him a cursory glance and waved his hand, turning his attention back to the console in front of him. Frosting on your lapel, Odin. Lucas fought a blush and brushed the white frosted crumbs from his collar, clearing his throat again. He really needed to stop eating whatever the ship's operating computer sent him. But he hated the thought of waste. Sock, status. The captain raised his voice, gruff but resonant. The computer beeped and replied. Mission objective. Convey Martian Ambassador Taurius to the Council of Kuiper on Pluto. Status. Ambassador Taurius secured. En route to Pluto. Arrival in 4 days, 13 hours, 9 minutes, 8.2 seconds. Thank you, Sock. Captain Harris turned to look at Lucas again. Sounds like you can probably handle things from here. I believe I'm due for a nap. He ran a weathered hand over his face and stifled a yawn. Lucas watched the tight skin of his cheeks stretch and snap back into place, and wondered if the older man had ever smiled in his life. Sir, he acknowledged. With a nod, Harris rose and left the bridge. After the doors closed behind the captain, Lucas meandered toward the chair. Lieutenant Casper. He bent over the console and pretended to study the screens very seriously. Where is the ambassador now? The munitions officer turned to face him, a smile playing in her blue eyes. Resting in the luxury suite, sir. Lucas nodded. Randall? What about Sock's path? Any cause for concern? The helmsman shook his head. Looks good, sir. ETA on point. Should skim beneath the belt with no difficulty. Beyond, open seas. That's what I like to hear. Lucas settled into the chair, felt its weight envelope him for just a moment, suffocating. He straightened his back and breathed. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have a planet to save. Yes, sir. The helmsman's fingers flew over his console, pulling up a subroutine embedded deep within Sock. Program is ready, he said. Lucas smiled. On screen. In an instant, the bridge went from calm and quiet to a mishmash of blinking red lights, emergency sirens, and a chaotic scene on the view screen. Directly ahead, Lucas saw the alien blue and white swirl of Earth, the mother planet. A shadow fell over the surface, followed by the hulking body of the enemy ship, an otherworldly creation of twisted metal and effervescent tentacles, like some strange deep-sea creature. A quick series of 3 beeps sounded, and Sock's voice came over the speakers. Enemy missiles detected. Impact in 12, 11, 10. Tactical, where are our countermissiles? Lucas's voice was tight, brimming with the excitement of command and near certain failure. If they were going to go up in a ball of flame, the least he could do was ensure their enemy joined them. The screen at his console flared to life and showed a wave of perhaps a dozen red dots honing in on their position. Nuclear, each one. If they couldn't stop the barrage, they were all going to die. Countermissiles away, sir. Casper's smile was gone, replaced with a hard look of focus. But the fire hadn't left her eyes. The enemy missiles popped up first on the main screen, a blur of space junk appearing out of the void between them and the alien craft. Then their own defensive munitions rose up from beneath the bridge, and for a moment everyone held their breath in utter silence. The hiss of the bridge doors was deafening. 2 privates stood there, unmoving for a moment, their eyes glued to the screen. A young man and a young woman, her uniform bearing the additional striped sleeve denoting security. Lucas caught them out of the corner of his eye and suppressed a smile. "What's your business, privates?" Lucas called around without turning. Let them think the first officer was too busy keeping them alive to give them his full attention. Why not? But he turned to face the kids after a few more seconds of silence. "State your business." Sir." The young man fumbled through a salute. That is, excuse me, sir." He shook his head in disbelief. "But what's going on?" "War game." The security private hadn't taken her eyes from the view screen. Her voice was full of awe. "But I've never seen one like this. Where did you get this footage?" The screen lit up in a fury of explosions as their countermissiles slammed into the enemy offensive, stopping it cold in the dead of space. A cheer went up from the bridge. Lucas allowed himself a tight smile, then circled back to the privates. "Privates, either take a station or get off my bridge. Things are a little hot up here, as you can see." The 2 glanced at each other, smiled, and both ran to the empty second gunner station. "Dibs, Angie," the man whispered. "But I'm a gunner," she whispered back. "So am I." Lucas cleared his throat. The privates fell silent and pounded out a quick game of sword pistol wizard. Angie sighed audibly after, then resigned herself to an open comm station. Lucas nodded and turned back to face his crew. "Lieutenant, report." His voice was sure now that they'd survived that first attack. It was their first time calculating the countermissiles correctly. Usually, They were shredded to bits by now. Nuke stores depleted by 10%. Second battery loading. Ready for launch in 0.5 minutes. Lucas watched his lieutenant as her hands flew over her console. She was the best in the fleet. But could they sit another 30 seconds in open space before they were ready to fight again? And how could they take the offensive? The edge of the moon crept onto the right side of the view screen, cratered and luminous. Helmsman! He turned his gaze back to the screen. Hard to starboard. A feint, sir? Randall began punching in a sequence. A gambit. Lucas gripped the arms of his chair as the pressure of the tight turn weighed him down. Sick mods, the excited private whispered from his gunning station. Gunner. Lucas turned his head toward the private. It's Private Tompkins, sir. Sure. How are the rotary guns looking? Ready to roll? Tompkins' eyebrows met his hairline. Then he began searching for the guns on his console. Lucas could understand the kid's confusion. Rotary guns weren't a feature of the actual Fairfax. The fleet assumed a ship her size would rely on nukes and non-nuclear missiles. Anymore, guns were usually reserved for fighters, and fighters weren't seen that often in the Kuiper fleet. Yes, sir. The kid smiled confidently, still focused on his console. Rotaries up and ready at will. Good work. Be ready on my mark. We've got a squid to skewer. Aye, sir. How about my nukes, Lieutenant? Casper smirked and shifted her gaze from her console to the view screen. Ready to fry some fish, sir. That's what I like to hear. Lucas engaged the safety harness that pulled him tighter still into the chair. Ahead, the view screen showed the darkened back of the moon, her surface a blur as they flew around. It was such a textbook maneuver, he was surprised it was actually working. All right, people, strap yourselves in. As soon as we get a visual, Helm, break us out of this slingshot. Lieutenant, give them the next battery. And Gunner, get ready to strafe with everything we've got. The crew muttered their aye, sirs, and he took a deep breath to calm his nerves. This was it. This was his moment, his chance to finally break the cycle of failure and claim the glory, honor, and success that belonged to the Fairfax, to his crew, to him. Sir, the security private spun in her chair. I'm picking up a reading of a... Hold that thought, Private, he said. But it's just that... He silenced her with his hand in the air, not bothering to turn. The knuckles of his other hand whitened from gripping the chair. His breath quickened. They were almost there now. He could see the blinking dot of the enemy on his tactical console. They were seconds away, then a second, and then... The view screen flared to life with a glaring sun as they emerged from behind the moon, and for a moment everything was reduced to blinding light. But he knew they were there. Had to be. Now, now, now! He yelled. He was thrust back into his chair as Randall took them out of the lunar slingshot. Everything tipped. Bombs away! Casper's voice was elated. It was the first time she'd gotten a volley off before the enemy. Now they had the initiative, and it was a beautiful sight. Their nukes rose up and jettisoned out into space in an immaculate row, like perfectly trained field soldiers, each one a destroyer of worlds. Tactical showed the enemy ship get their shots out, but they couldn't have anticipated the guns that would follow. Lucas bit his lip to keep from grinning like a teenager at a gaming conference. This game was almost over, and they had the ace. Then Sock spoke up. Enemy missiles detected port side. Impact in 7, 6, 5... What? Casper shot Lucas a look, incredulous. On his console, he saw the little red blips appear behind them. He sat, staring. How? He slumped in the chair. My reading, sir. The security private spilled out the words, doubtless afraid to be cut off again. It's another 2 ships that were cloaking themselves from Sock's sweep by hugging the lunar surface on the dark side. Sir? Casper cleared her throat. Permission to jettison trash chutes. Her voice was so distant. Everything was. The flashing red lights blurred around him, and that familiar sickening knot, the same that had visited him in his first 3 failed attempts to pass the command combat test at the academy, tightened in his stomach. In the end, he'd passed his last shot by the skin of his teeth, and everyone there knew that had only been because the faculty had felt sorry for him and had justified themselves because of his other scores. But here and now, this was just another colossal failure. Sir! Casper was on her feet now, leaning over his console. He shook himself from his stupor. Too late. Sock's voice was all too chipper for the news she delivered. 3, 2, 1, impact! Destruction complete. Game over. Goodbye. The screen flashed off and was replaced with the void through which they sailed. Lights and sirens abated. Casper cursed and returned to her seat, cracking her knuckles on the way. Lucas unstrapped his harness. Next time. Randall seemed the only crewman up to optimism, even if a little forced. That was better than ever, sir. Next time, they're ours. Lucas wasn't sure when that would be. He was tired of failing in front of his crew, and in spite of their forced smiles, they were tired of it too. He could tell. He turned to the security private at the comm. What's your name, Private? Mulligan, sir. She saluted, and he half-heartedly returned. How did you know? Surely they weren't broadcasting their position. Helm had nothing. I had nothing. She looked down at her console. There was an anomaly in the sensor sweep as we completed the slingshot, sir. A cluster of tight, short-wave frequencies. Nothing the fleet uses. It's an outdated form of... radio, he said. She nodded, smiling. A shock of curly red hair had broken free from her tight bun, and she swept it out of her face. I should have guessed, he murmured. Every time they had run the simulations, the aliens had surprised them with new twists on old technologies. That's why he had been inspired to order kinetics this time. They had gone down in a blaze of glory 3 or 4 runs past, when they had been pinned down by a strafing run before being obliterated by nukes. His reverie was broken by Sock's voice. Unidentified ships ahead, closing. He glanced up at the screen and thought he saw a distant shape reflecting starlight out into the void. His console lit up with 2 little blips, dead ahead. "Captain on the bridge," Sock announced. The doors slid open, and the crew all rose to their feet, Lucas with them. "Sir," he saluted. Captain Harris returned it and took his chair. His face was even grimmer than usual as he studied his console. After a moment, he cleared his throat. "All missiles ready, Lieutenant." "Aye, sir." "Gunner, spin up the plasma charge." Tompkins turned to face the captain, the question on his lips. Lucas caught his eye and shook his head. The kid returned to his console and began calling up the plasma charger. No point letting the captain know they had been playing their heavily modded game on the bridge just seconds before. "Sir," Lucas's mouth ran dry. "Are we expecting a fight?" Harris let out a sigh through his nose, frowning up at the view screen. The distant shapes had coalesced into 2 distinct vessels, their bodies sleek and fierce. "If I had to place a bet, yes, expect a fight." "Any idea what we're dealing with here?" The captain nodded, his eyes never leaving the view. "Pirates." This concludes another episode of the Book Speaks podcast, where the book speaks for itself. Thanks for joining me, your host, Benjamin Douglas, for another indie author reading. If you liked what you heard, be sure to visit http://thebookspeakspodcast.wordpress.com for more episodes and for links to the author's website and the author's Amazon author page in the show notes. If you'd like to follow me on my own author journey, you can find me at http://benjamindouglasbooks.wordpress.com. And of course, if you're an indie author interested in having your work featured on the show, or if you're interested in discussing having your book read and produced by me as an audiobook, feel free to contact me at benjamindouglasbooks@gmail.com. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you have a productive and enjoyable weekend.